Festival, please welcome director Shaunak Sen. So we're lucky to have Shaunak. He's about to fly off to Amsterdam for the IDFA Festival. So thank you for making time to talk to us for a little bit. Shaunak, can you talk about the crew that you brought together to make this film? You're based in India, but you have a kind of international crew, some of whom are here today.
Yeah, sure. So, well, firstly, hi. Thank you for being here. And it's really lovely to screen again in this context. The crew actually, incidentally, Ben, our cinematographer, is here. Um, I think very early on in the film, it started becoming clear to me that the usual verite style of shooting would not be sufficient. So I think the first 8 to 9 months, I was shooting handheld. And soon it became apparent that, handheld shooting is often restless and anxious. And this film required a kind of more meditative, a contemplative style of shoot. Because the brothers themselves are like philosophers of the urban, right? And this couldn't be a restless or an anxious style. So we had to find something that allowed people to kind of zoom out and think. And it's only midway through that we realized that this couldn't just be a sweet film about nice people doing good things. So it couldn't just be a story of a bird hospital alone. So it had to have this panoply of other animals like, the rats, pigs, horses, snails, and so on. So it required a certain style of shooting and a slow style of shooting, I used to be a huge fan of Victor Kosakowski's shooting. So, and Ben has shot a bunch of those monumental films. So we got in touch with Ben. And then an Indian cinematographer called Riju Das also shot with him. With the edit also, we realized that we were using often the tools of fiction to tell a non-fiction story, right? We're using crane shots, tracks, and so on. So the edit had to be a kind of different rhythm. The only sense that I vaguely had was that I knew that the basic structuring principle predicating the entire film was we would keep shuttling between an extremely cramped small place, so extreme compression, and it would cut to the skies of Delhi. So it would be like extreme compression to extreme decompression. So an extremely claustrophobic tiny space to the skies. So compression, so a little like inhaling and exhaling, like breathing, right? And that would be so there had to be a kind of loose form to it, and this wasn't a film that was plot driven per se. So I loved the edit of this film called The Truffle Hunters from a few years ago, and when I saw the editor's name, I realized that she was also the editor of Act of Killing. So of course also knows how to work with a mountain of footage, and we shot for over 3 years, so we had 400 hours of footage. So yeah, we reached out to her and an Indian editor called Vedant Joshi. So basically, it wasn't so much about, usually it's co-production money that requires you to spend money in a certain country, which was not the case at all here. Thankfully, our producers, some of who are here actually, Sean and Teddy, were basically gave me the liberty to literally say, this editor here in this country, this DP here, and go and work with them.
Let me take some questions from the audience. Raise your hand if you have one. I'll try to repeat it right here. So the question was about sort of the environmental aspects of the conditions that affect the birds.
Right. So this is a complicated answer actually. So the thing is that one thing is of course the sheer opacity of the air, and the bigger birds increasingly either collide into buildings or get entangled in wires. The other thing is the paper kite flying cultural practice. So as the visibility lessens, birds increasingly sort of get entangled in the wires and get injuries. But more than that, it's a complicated thing, So the kite also ironic. This is not the problem in this film is not a conservation crisis. There's no dwindling population. The fact that the city produces an enormous amount of waste means that it's one of the biggest landfills in the world. And the kite actually has a very successful and thriving urban career. So the greater the number of, greater the population, the greater the injuries also. Apart from that, there's a whole other variety of reasons like essentially the vultures, who were the apex predators in Delhi, die out because of this thing called the diclofenac event, where diclofenac is used as pesticide. Livestock eats it. After they die, the vultures eat the carcasses and they have renal failure and die. So once the vultures die out, the kites have no predators above them. Anyway, so broad variety. It's not it's not one simple reason, but a whole variety of ecological reasons that lead to it.
So can you talk about how you constructed the narration?
Right. Well, firstly, thank you for watching it these many times. Um, no, I really mean it. I mean this in a genuine sense. The voiceover, it's a great question. So the thing is that I think a year in, I realized that they also have really clever and wise things to say. And the problem with the verite style of shooting is that there's a lot of emphasis on the here and now, right? So the temporality is about the immediate present. And the thing is, I wanted to invoke two things. One is the kind of aura that they felt about. So essentially, the film is also a kind of love story between a man and a bird, right? And I wanted to invoke this sense of wondrous, otherworldly aura that they first felt when they first encountered the kite. That, which was a childhood thing, and they spoke about it through the prism of memory. Apart from that, they also said really intelligent things about urban ecology, and which included evolution and behavioral changes and so on. But at the same time, their perspective, I think it's rich, is that it's not just a rational secular perspective or a Western slash scientific perspective, right? They're also informed by a non-Western cosmology that also comes from their spiritual beliefs, which I think only makes things richer and denser. So, in order to kind of assimilate all of those gems, those observational gems, I had a diary which basically grew thicker by the day, and it was basically clever things said by Nadeem and Saud. And after a while, I realized I had to pack it all in. So then I realized that, so usually I cringe a bit when there are voiceovers in films, but I felt like if we fully embraced a kind of a lyrical or a poetic style where we indicate that this is obviously stylized and the images are also lyrical and stylized, then that'll work. So what I did was that I basically made it as precise, like from the stuff that they had said, and got them to record it separately. So it is a separate kind of a recording that we did to indicate that this is obviously stylized, but it's material where the raw fodder comes out of their life.
Right there in the white. So how did you meet the brothers and come to make the film?
Right. So I think the film started taking vague shape in my head before ever meeting the brothers. When you live in Delhi, the air itself is such a opaque, grey, visceral, palpable, tactile entity that you're constantly aware of it. You know, how bad the PM 2.5 or the PM 10 is constantly part of everyday discourse. So I wanted to make something about this sort of grayness, this sensorium that was laminating everybody's life and has been for the last many years, especially every winter. So I had a vague kind of a abstract triangulation between air, bird, humans. And that's how and anyway, a film usually starts. I don't ever fully understand when it's said that I was interested in this topic, because it feels like it comes usually as a mood or a tone, you know, or a texture. And at any rate, this film came like that. And I was interested in doing something about this grayness. And I would always look up at, you know, the sky usually is this monochromatic gray expanse with these tiny black dots gliding in it, which are the black kites. And I was gripped by this idea, what happens when one of these dots falls down. And so I literally Googled, where do birds that fall off the sky go? And the brothers come up. But once you visited the brothers, you know, it's like planet basement, that space, is because you have these grubby metal cutting machines on one side, and you know, it's very industrial decay type, and on the other you have these incredible birds being treated. So it's just, you know, that space made me think of Tarkovsky and, you know, like Stoker, and that's the kind of dense mise en scène, right? And you don't get a sense of what time of day it is, and there's a kind of cyclicality to it. So I was very drawn to that space itself. And then I think, so that's how the film started. But then, it's like you jump off a cliff, right? And you don't really have a sense of where the film is going. And it's like a fever dream after that, right? So I think it started vaguely around when I met them or when I started thinking of this, but it's always in these indiscrete fragments that you can't really tell when it began. But I think it started with a general interest in the grayness of our lives.
Okay, I'm going to be able to take one more question, and then after that, we'll ask you to move out to the lobby, and perhaps Shaunak can spend a little time answering questions there. But we do have another film coming up, so that's why I'm just make that announcement. Here's a hand right up in my face. Go ahead. So can you talk about the years of production that you were shooting, and how is the Bird Hospital now?
So 3 years in all. 2.5 years of shooting and about 9 to 10 months of editing. But the editing, the first 4 or 5 months sort of overlapped in Delhi, and then we cut the remaining in about 5 months or 6 months in Denmark with Charlotte. The brothers, the hospital looks similar. There are some new enclosures that have been built now. But that apart, their life has changed somewhat with this film. They came to Cannes, all the brothers, Salik included. The Nadeem has now gone to more festivals than I have. He went to Krakow, he went to Australia, he of course came to Cannes. He came here for the New York Film Festival opening and then the opening at Film Forum. And the brothers have also been, Saud and Salik have also been traveling to other festivals in India. Our producers have very generously supported their hospital for the next 1 year at least. So there is a clear material change. But having said that, it's not like the entirety of your life changes. What they've vowed to do now, through their life, is an incredibly, staggeringly difficult thing, right? They want to devote their entire lives to helping injured birds. And more often than not, just raptors, right? So, of course, it's still financially and emotionally extremely exacting and tough. The spotlight that the film has given on their work, of course, helps because there's a kind of recognition. And more importantly, the thing that they say to me, which I think matters, is that they feel seen and witnessed, which is nice but that's where they are right now. They're very excited about what's happening with the film, and they were always perpetually worried that I was making in their words, a unbearably boring film that nobody will see. So I'm glad that now that
Little they know there'd be people coming and see it for the 5th time.
Yeah, exactly. So now when they see the audiences there, Nadeem up till Cannes, and also the thing is in Cannes people often walk out. It's this bizarre thing that happens. So during the screening he would turn towards me and would say, "See, I told you that people would." So, but now with other screenings, etc., he's now fully at peace with the fact that the film is watchable. So I think they're more or less happy, but which is not to simplify the difficulties in their life. They still, of course, lead a genuinely arduous life.
This film is playing as part of our short list of 15 films that we think are among the best of the year. Hope you get to see more on the short list and more films at the festival, playing here in person until Thursday and then continuing online through Thanksgiving weekend. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks especially to Shaunak Sen.